Hello and Assalamu alaikum, everyone. I'm Kashif Kamran, and a very warm welcome to the SBL March 2025 pre-scene debrief, which is around historical places, a heritage charity in Indonesia. Let's open this debrief. Let's understand the agenda of this debrief, and let's see what is in store for this debrief over the next 2 hours. The agenda of this debrief. First of all, I need to share my experience and the emphasis on some misconceptions with pre-scene. This is the seventh pre-scene since the pre-scene was started in September 22, but we still have some misconceptions with pre-scene which needs to be addressed in. Summarizing the pre-scene, likely questions, key models, and key articles. That's all what we have in the session today. Particularly, I think the students will be more interested to know the likely questions, the key models, and the key articles, because that's been the frequently asked questions in the last 48 hours. What can come in? What are the key questions? Which mock paper should we do, etc. So I'll be addressing all that later in the pre-scene. But first, we need to do the misconception part and summarizing the pre-scene. Misconceptions. Number one, pre-scene is not the answer. The majority or the full answer is within the exhibits on the day of exam. You have 4 exhibits on the day of exams, right? And those 4 exhibits will give you the information which you need to draft your answer. Pre-scene is just giving you the familiarity, it's just giving you the context. Now, today on the 24th of Feb, when we have exams a week later, we know so much about historical places, right? We know so much facts about historical places. We know so much information about historical places. We know about risk. We know about governance. We know about their financial performance. We know about their non-financial performance. Now, that's the context. That's the familiarity. And each one of us over the last 1 week since the pre-scene was released have developed that familiarity. And now all of us have on fingertips the facts, the figures, the governance, the risk, the challenges, the problems, the issues, and we know all of that. Now, when you're writing the answer on the day of exam, because you're so much familiar with the terminologies, you're so much familiar with the jargons, you're so much familiar with the information, that will spontaneously or naturally come in your answer. You're not forcefully applying the pre-scene in your answer. You're only applying pre-scene in your answer where needed. 90%, 95% of your answer, or even 100% of your answer will come from the 4 exhibits. But somewhere you might need to relate the pre-scene. Somewhere you might need to bring some information from the pre-scene, which will come naturally. When you're writing the answer in the exam, you might recall that there was some issues in the financial information. Something was going down in the financial information. Something was going down in the non-financial information. You might recall some of the risk the charity was facing, or you might recall some of the challenges the charity was facing, or you might recall something about governance, the two-tier board, you might recall something about the board of trustees, etc. And you might recall something about the volunteers, about the members, and you might relate that in your answer. But it's just not like a forceful application. It's just an application where needed. I hope you're all clear on that. So this will spontaneously help you somewhere in the answers, but pre-scene should not be forcefully applied. A lot of time I've seen students that they think about just forcing the pre-scene in every answer they're writing, and they will not be happy till the time they've not forced the pre-scene in the answer. Not at all. The real answer is in the exhibits. Pre-scene is just making you familiar. So on the day of exam, when you're reading about the exhibits, you will easily understand them because you've understood the charity, you've understood historical places, you've understood the terminologies, you know who are members, you know who are volunteers, you know who are donors, you know these are charities which are limited by guarantee, you know about guarantors, You know this charity was established 120 years ago. You know there is a bit of issues in their financial performance. This is all what's needed at the end of the day. It's just about a summary. It's just about a familiarity at the end of the day, which helps you on the day of exam to just link the pre-scene where needed, where possible, not forcefully. Is everyone clear on the misconception side? Is everyone clear about what's expected from you around pre-scene? So a lot of time, the student just consider that the pre-scene is the answer. They just rote learn the pre-scene, just go over the pre-scene as if this is the answer and this is what we need to write on the day of exam. Not at all. What about the 4 exhibits which will come on the day of exam? What about the value of the 4 exhibits which will come on the day of exam, which will give you specific information from where the answer will be made? Is everyone clear? Is everyone clear about the misconceptions? Are you all sound on misconception area before we move on to the next part? Okay, great. Just let's move on. Thank you. Now comes the pre-scene. Now, if you have gone over the pre-scene, which has been released by the SBL examining team, ideally spread over 10 pages, it's been split into 3 parts as per my understanding. The first part of the pre-scene is about a charitable sector, and they have given us an overview of the charitable sector in terms of its legal position, that these charities are limited by guarantee and the role of the guarantor. And they've given us the regulations of the charities, like the name of the regulator, CSB, the Charity Supervisory Board. Then they've given us the subsector information, the heritage subsector, and they've given us about what is a heritage subsector. They've given us their income, how the income comes for this subsector, the expenses, the stakeholders of the heritage subsector, the challenges the heritage subsector is facing about in terms of preserving and conserving the historical places, and the KPIs. Then they come to the main charity, historical places. They're telling us about historical places, their historical background, that it was established 120 years ago, the value, the code of conduct, the stakeholders, the important stakeholders for historical places, which is much similar to the stakeholders of the sector itself, governance, two-tier board primarily, risk, couple of risks this charity is facing, which is put into their risk register, their IT systems, the extent of information technology in this particular charity, and then some financial and non-financial summary being given to us at the end of the pre-scene. So this is a comprehensive perspective. This is how you need to go with the next week, knowing that there is a charitable sector, there is a heritage subsector, and then there is a charity known as historical places. Let's open up. Let's see where we need the familiarity. Lots of thinking points, lots of critical thinking, lots of tips and techniques over the next 60 minutes. Please keep noting it down. Keep a pen and paper with you, and you will definitely be getting the presentation at the end of the session along with the recording. Okay, now let's first start with the charitable sector in ERDCA. Let's see what is this charitable sector in ERDCA and what the examining team is trying to tell us. This is the information which I summed up for the charitable sector in ERDCA. We know this is a charitable sector. So the basic objective of the charitable sector is to work for the welfare of the society broadly. The purpose is not profit seeking, but the purpose is welfare. So you need to keep that in mind. Number two, they've given us the legal side of the charitable sector and the regulatory side, and some information is important. They tell us that the legal side is that these are companies limited by guarantee. Guarantor takes on the debts in the event of insolvency, and the surplus funds are reinvested into the charity. So that's the difference between income and expenses. The surplus funds goes into the charity, that's not distributed to the guarantors. Operations of the charity adhere to the Constitution. So just like we have a memorandum of association and an article of association for the normal organizations, for the charities, we have a document known as a Constitution, which is basically the policies and procedures the charity needs to adhere to. And the fundraising, which is an important part of charity, the fundraising comes from the donations, and the fundraising comes from their wholly owned subsidiaries, which are basically the commercial activities. So all these charities runs the commercial activities like the shops, like the cafes at the historical places. And from those shops and cafes, they generate a lot of income, which goes into the work of the charity. And these shops are wholly owned by the charity. On the right side, the regulations, which is important on the day of exam, you need to know the name of the regulator. That's the CSB, Charity Supervisory Board. The supervisory board is responsible to supervise, to monitor, to have an oversight of the charitable operation in ERDCA. Any misconducts, any bad things, any unethical practices will be identified by the CSB, and the CSB will make you accountable for any bad information. So on a day of exam, in an exhibit, there could be any bad information. There could be anything which is being investigated by CSB on part of historical places. Historical places could be doing something wrong, and the CSB has raised that concern to you. So that could be likely on the day of exam. Investigate the misconduct. So there could be a possible misconduct around HP on the day of exam. A certain information, a certain exhibit can give us information about that. So just be open to that and just be prepared for that. All charities prepare accounts and have audits. All charities, irrespective of the size. Report on internal control and risk management is reviewed by the external auditor. And this is a requirement for a charity whose annual income exceeds $10 million. And HP has an income over $10 million. So HP needs to prepare a report on internal control and risk management, which is reviewed by the external auditor. So there could be a question around internal control weaknesses, internal control problems. You might be asked to write a report on internal control, or you might be asked to evaluate the weaknesses in internal control on the day of exam, because HP fulfills the criteria of making a report on internal controls and risk management. And then finally, the charities are exempt from tax. Now, there are a couple of points which I would like to address with you. So I'm just making some summaries of this particular slide. Okay. I hope you can see this slide on your screen. I'm just writing something for your importance here. Number one point, which I would like to address with you in this case, is that I got a point which I would like all of you to note down. Just let's put that in red. Number one, there could be an exhibit on day of exam regarding any misconduct by HP being investigated by CSB. So that's my thought process, because there is a CSB and they do look into the misconduct. Number two, there might be a exhibit around internal control weaknesses and evaluation, internal control weaknesses and its evaluation. And there could be a question around actions to be taken around the weaknesses identified. Actions to be taken around the weaknesses, So that could be some likely questions which can pop into the exam or on the day of exam. So you just need to be a bit watchful of this. So I'm just putting a big bulb over here. So you know these are important things which needs to be remembered on the day of exam. So these are just some elements you need to know from this particular slide. So wherever I find something important, I'll just keep emphasizing on that. So you know at the end of the day, you need to remember this. Some important thinking point. This is what I'm writing on here. So once you take a printout of this presentation, you know what to do. Is everyone clear with this? Is everyone clear with the charitable sector, the legal side and the regulatory side, and some important thinking points around the CSB, any possible information coming on the day of exam around it, and more importantly, some weaknesses in internal control, because this organization is preparing a report on internal control and the HP meets the criteria. Currently, you just need to agree or disagree with me, and at the end of the day, we'll have a 15 minutes of a Q&A session. Okay, just let's move on to the next part of this charitable sector. Now let's look at the heritage subsector. So we've done the charitable sector. We're look into the legal position and the regulatory side of the charitable sector in year DCA. Now we're looking into the heritage subsector, which is more important because historical places is from the heritage subsector. Okay, now this is what we got in the pre-scene about the heritage subsector. Overview on the left-hand side. The overview tells us that this heritage subsector is responsible for preserving the historical and the cultural sites and associated objects. So the particular charities in the heritage subsector is preserving, is conserving the historical places, not just historical places, but historical objects like furniture, like paintings, any such things which are part and parcel of these historical places. So you're not just conserving the place, you're also conserving the objects. Forming partnerships with educational institutions for training in conservation. So the heritage charities do enter into some strategic partnerships with educational institutions, particularly the educational institutions who are offering any degree or any program in conservation, in preservation of historical places. We know lots of universities do deal with such programs where they do offer students some degrees or some diplomas in like conservation, preservations, climatical areas like climatical changes and how climatical changes is impacting the historical properties, etc. So you can engage with those institutions as historical place, or historical place can enter into a strategic partnership or a strategic alliance with any educational institution for the purpose of training, for the purpose of training their volunteers, for the purpose of training their paid employees, or even engaging with the university for finding ways to conserve, for finding ways to preserve, or finding ways to battle with the climatical changes. So HP can enter into a strategic alliance, right, with a university, and they can engage with university on a research as to how to preserve, what are ways to preserve, conservation, climatical changes and how to overcome the climatical changes impacting the historical places, and to give training to their volunteers and to their paid employees. So in that context, see what I've written down. I've written down over here that strategic alliance with institutions. There is an article, right? You know there is an article in under the syllabus area C, growing in partnership. And in growing in partnership, there is a section which is about strategic alliances. There is a section strategic alliances. That is important. So I believe there could be some specific exhibit on the day of exam which might ask you that HP wants to enter into a strategic alliance with an educational institution for broadening the research around conservation, around preservation, around climatical changes. So that's really important, right? And that's where you need to be. Ahmed Hafiz, if you can just put off your camera. Thank you. Please ensure that you're all keeping off your camera. You're just distracting me within the session. So is everyone clear with the part forming partnerships with educational institutions? Because that's something given to us in the pre-scene. And you know there is an article growing in partnership. So you better know strategic alliances. You better know the benefits of strategic alliances. That's really important. Then they tell us that there are two largest heritage charities in EADCA. One is the historical places that we are dealing with, and one is the living the past. The important thing between historical places and living the past is that historical places is looking after historical places which are over 300-year old, and living the past, which is the second most important charity, is looking after historical places under 300 years, sorry, could be 200 years, 150 years, 100 years. But over 300 years means that the base is 300. So who is looking after the older historical places? And the more older the places are, you need to incur a lot of cost on them, lot of cost to maintain them, lot of cost to preserve them. Uh, if the places are older, they have more risk of a climatical damage. So probably historical places is looking after sites which are 300 over 300 years old. So that means any of the historical site which HP is dealing with is either 300 years or over 300 years old. And in that way, you are more exposed to incurring cost. You're more exposed to repairing and maintaining. You're more exposed to incurring cost on conserving and preserving. So your cost side will be more heavier than living the past. And climatical changes and the damages coming from the climatical changes can impact historical places more than living the past. Is everyone clear between over 300 and less than 300? Because less than 300 means it could also be 100 years old. It could also be 50 years old. But over 300 means 300, 400, 500, 600. So more older the historical place, is that more risky? Will that increase your cost? Will that increase your cost of repairing? Will that increase your cost of preserving? Will that expose you to more climatical changes and the damages coming from the climatical changes? Is everyone clear with that? Yeah, more cost, right, on the conservation, right? So conserving them, maintaining them is one of the same thing, right? You conserve them, you maintain them into their best possible condition. So overview, and in overview, I think you should all be knowing the article Growing in Partnership, because there is a hint of an alliance with educational institution. And just you do remember that one of the problem with historical places is that all the historical sites they have are 300 years or more, older by 300 years or more. Challenges. Some of the challenges this sector is facing. Number one challenge they're facing is climatical challenges affecting the sites. You know, these are old sites, and pollutions or severe weathers like high humidity or wear and tear from visitor traffic to site can really damage these historical places. So climatical changes do have an impact on these older places because they're not very in not very good condition. And the more traffic, the more human traffic that comes to these places can damage the beauty of these places or the historical importance of these places. And more about these floodings, severe weathers, pollutions, and high humidity can also cause disaster to the historical sites. So climatical change is one of a major challenge, and that's a true challenge you should keep in mind in exam. Number two, volunteers. The volunteers are unpaid. We know volunteers are an important part of any charitable organization in the world, whichever charity we are talking about. But while volunteers are unpaid, so they can reduce your salary expenses, their availability can be inconsistent, and they may choose to discontinue their service unexpectedly because they're unpaid, right? So they might be inconsistent, they might be available, they might not be available, and they might be very casual on a given day, and they might leave the service of HP um, unexpectedly. So you need to be open to that risk, that because they're not your paid employees, they are just unpaid. So they might be very casual in their behavior. They might be very inconsistent in their presence on a site on a given day. Someday they might be available, someday they might not be available. There could be a larger absenteeism from the volunteers as well. So there could be some underlying problems with volunteers on a day of exam in any given exhibit, any issues, any underlying issues with volunteers on the day of exam. Competition from non-heritage charity. If I want to give a donation or you want to give a donation, we have so many options. We have so many options to give donations to. There are so many charitable organizations. So if I have to give like $100, I have hundreds of charities and I can think about which one is good and I'll just give it. And it all depends upon the popularity. It also depends upon the marketing. Sometimes a charity is known because they've marketed a lot. And that's the problem. Is HP marketing? Is HP known? Is HP has a good image in Eardesia? That's very important. Because charities which are in news at any time may raise considerable sum of money. Which news? Good news, not bad news. What if on a day of exam, HP is in a bad news? And if HP is in a bad news because of something they've done wrong and they have been investigated by the CSB, the regulator, that means the income or the charitable income will be diverted to other charities. The charity income might be diverted to Living the Past or to any other charity in Eardesia. So you need to ensure you have a good image, you have a good repute, and you have a good marketing. Everyone knows about you in good sense, not in bad sense. So that is my perspective, that on a day of exam you might get something wrong about HP, which might increase the challenge number 3 for them. Number 4th, recession in Eardesia. This is happening. This is reality. Uh, Climatical changes. This is what if. Volunteers, what if. Competition, what if. This can develop into an exhibit on the day of exam. So if examiner wants to give you something about climatical changes, the examining team can give you an exhibit. Volunteers, exhibit. Competition, exhibit. But recession is happening. It's given in the pre-scene that there is a recession in Eardesia. So because there is a recession, so probably this will not probably, it is impacting the income. It is impacting the flow of donations to the charitable organizations in Eardesia. When there is a recession, your income goes down as an individual. My savings goes down in recessions. So if I have less savings, so I have less savings, so I might be giving less donations as well. So in a recession, because my income will be impacted, and if I am a donor, I will be giving less donations. I will be prioritizing my own needs over donations. So that's happening currently in Eardesia. There is a recession, and we know when we look at the financial picture of HP, there is some decline in their income, which needs to be monitored. So is everyone clear with the challenges, climatical challenges we have in place? We do have volunteers challenges because they are unpaid. We do have competition challenge, which can develop on the day of exam. And then we do have the recession. These are 4 key challenges you need to have on your fingertips. And where needed, you can just put them in your answer. But the important thing from this slide is the article, growing in partnership, or anything around a strategic alliance. Is that clear, all of you? We'll see at the end of the day the likely questions from what I'm discussing with you, right? So just be open to that. Next, we've done the heritage subsector. Now, heritage subsector, income and expenses. We know the income for the heritage subsector is coming from 4 sources. Number 1, the income is coming from the donations. The donations can come from websites, or you can collect donations at the historical places like physical. Membership fees, the income is coming from the membership fees. Either it's one-off or annual. Annual is better because you get regular income, but one-off is like that anyone gives you a charity of like $10 million in 1 year, but that's one-off. He's not giving you later. But Annual is like the person is giving you a donation every year of like $10,000 and on a regular basis. So that is more regular. One off is like sometime you get it, sometime you don't. But membership fees is a source of income. Admission fees. We know admission fees are paid by the non-members when they're visiting the historical places. So when they visit the historical places, they do give the admission fees like a ticket. They buy a ticket or whatever they buy, and then the commercial activities, whatever they buy from shops like souvenirs, any mugs, anything from the shops like magnets, and even what they buy from the cafe like a coffee or a cup of tea, etc. So all that is being paid. So four sources of income. We might be given some breakdowns of incomes on the day of exam, something to analyze in which income is going down, which income is going up, where HP needs to focus on. So currently, we don't have the breakup of income much, except for very limited financial information on which I am coming shortly. But these are four sources of income. There could be any potential problem in a source of income or in a source of income where HP needs to build upon. Expenses, site operating cost, day-to-day running expenses, wages of the employee who works at sites. So these are two possible breakdowns of the site operating cost. You know, they're dealing with historical places over 300 years old. So you can imagine a lot of pressure on the day-to-day running expenses. Site maintaining and conservation cost. This is the biggest challenge for historical places. This is the biggest challenge for historical places because they're dealing with sites which are 300 years or plus. That's a big problem, right, for them. And you can imagine that is why that information has been given to us, that they're dealing with sites which are 300 years over, and their competitor is dealing with sites under 300 years, sorry. So you can imagine that there will be a lot of pressure on site maintenance and conservation cost. And that's where you need to be very clear as student. Where is the pressure? Where is the pressure for HP? So site maintaining cost can become a problem on the day of exam. Just remember that. Now comes the most important thing. Administration cost. See what the examining team is telling us about administration cost. I've highlighted that in red for some reason. Administration cost includes the salary of the executive management. We have an executive board, right, which includes the CEO and the 5 directors. And we have the admin staff at the head office, the paid employees. I think we have roughly 4,000 paid employees, right? Marketing cost to keep your charity in news, to keep your charity known so that people can donate. We just saw one of the challenge, which was competition. So to keep you in the competition, you need to market. And lastly, cost of administering membership. So cost of administering your members. Members are important to your charity. There are like 5 million members you have currently as HP. So to administer them, you need that particular cost. Now, administration cost has a concern. What is that concern? That's given down over here. If you can see that bulb on the screen right here, that bulb is telling us something important. The pre-scene tells us that charities can suffer bad publicity and attract less support if administration costs are believed to be too high. Look at this if. Now, what I believe is in a given exhibit on Tuesday, there could be a concern by members. There could be a concern by the media. We know media is already a stakeholder given in the pre-scene, or by the CSB, the regulator, on the rising admin cost at HP. Agree or disagree? Because examining team has given us a specific breakdown of the administration cost, and then they have added this paragraph in the pre-scene that charities can suffer bad publicity if admin costs are believed to be high. They have not given such paragraph with site operating cost. They have not given us such paragraph with site maintenance cost. They've given us this paragraph with administration cost. So do you all agree that examining team is trying to draw your attention towards administration cost? And this can later develop into an exhibit on Tuesday. Are you all clear with it? So anything popping up around administration cost, any particular exhibit coming around administration cost, any concern of the member, media, or CSB can pop in. Are you all clear? So we need to be very, very clear about the admin cost and things around that, right? Okay. So heritage subsector. We talked about the income of the subsector. We talked about expenses of the subsector. And we also talked about the competitors we have in the subsector and the challenges. One article which is important is the article growing in partnership. And then we have to be very much alert about the recession we have in ERDCA. And then we need to be very much alert about administration cost. Let's just move on. Looking at the KPIs, something very, very important now. We have been given the KPIs of the heritage subsector, and we have been given the actual performance of HP against the KPI on the last 2 pages of the pre-scene. Now, I'm doing them together. I am doing the KPIs given to us, and I'm relating those KPIs with HP. So I'm not doing them separately, I'm doing them together. Now, this is my analysis. The KPIs are two, financial, non-financial. On the left-hand side of the screen, you can see the financial KPIs. Income, and you know where income comes from. We just got the breakup of the income, like memberships, like shops, like the charities which comes on the website, etc. Expenditures, we just got a breakup of the admin expenditures, particularly the admin cost. And operating margin, surplus. Surplus is basically the difference between income and expenditure. Okay, now my concern, when I evaluated the financial information given us about HP on the second last page, perhaps, I saw that the income there is a flattening of curve in income. I'll just show you that as well. There was a flattening of curve. The curve was going like this, and all of a sudden it started to flatten up. So there was a flattening of curve from 20x1 to 20x3. So it was going steep up, and all of a sudden it came this. So flattening of curve in income. So that means some problems are developing around the growth of income. Either it's because of the recession we have in ERDCA, or probably because of any bad publicity around HP, etc. Expenses. Expenses are rising sharply more than the income in 20x2 and 20x3. I'll just show you a glimpse of that. And when we say expenses are rising sharply, there could be some concern points around the admin cost rising sharply. And on a day of exam, you might get some issues around the admin cost. And the members believe that your admin cost is rising, or the salary you are giving to executive management is a lot more, because it's a charitable organization. So you cannot give very exuberant salaries to the executive management. Expenses growth rate are more than the income growth rate in 20x2 and 20x3. Just let me demonstrate that. Can you see this table here, all of you? I used the calculator when I was doing my analysis, and the graph was given, and in the graph we had the values. So I just tried to identify the exact values from the graph, looking at the values given by the examining team. There could be a plus minus 5, 10 $1 million variations. Probably if the figure is 550, I read it as 545, or the figure is 560, I read it as 565, because there was very difficulties in reading those numbers along with the graphical lines, but still I tried reading to the best of my knowledge. In XO and X1, the income increased by 5.44%. Whereas the expenses increased by 3.07%. So in that way, we're good. The income was more than the expenses growth. In X1 and X2, the income only grow by 2.58%, whereas the expenses grow by 7.46%. Look at that. Your expenses are growing more than your income growth. And that's what I've written in the red. Expenses growth are more than the income growth in X2 and X3. And then look at X2 and X3. In X2 and X3, your income grow just by 0.62%, that's even under 1%, and your expenses grow by 4.16%. My concern, there could be some concerns by members, there could be some concerns by media, there could be some concerns by CSB on your rising expenses, particularly admin expenses. Now look at the X2, all of you, and look at the X3, all of you. Do you all agree that the growth in expenses is more than the growth in income? Please, I'm waiting for your answers. Can you see the table? Can you see the table? And can you see X2 and X3 that the growth in expenses are more than the growth in income? Right? So when the growth in expenses is more than the growth in income, is it squeezing your surplus? Is it squeezing your surplus? When the expenses are growing more and income is growing less, is it squeezing your surplus? Yes. And is surplus important? Is surplus important? Because surplus needs to be reinvested. From the surplus, you can buy more historical places. So surplus is important, right? Because surplus gets reinvested, right? So what has happened? Look at the income. Is income growing at a declining rate? I'm not saying income is not growing. Income is growing, but at a declining rate. It was 5.44. It declined to 2.58. It declined to 0.62. So in all the 3 years, the income is growing, right? But the income is growing at a declining rate. And you look at the expenses are more healthier in growth, 7.46, 4.16. They've outperformed income. And when I look at the surplus in XO, the surplus in XO was $85 million, but the surplus in X3 was just $50 million. So surplus over the year has gone down. And you know, surplus is so important. The surplus has gone down from $85 million in XO to just a $50 million in X3. Is everyone clear on that? Is everyone clear on that analysis? Is everyone clear about my concern that the surplus is going down? That's one of the concern you need to be aware with. And second concern is your expenses rising. And your expenses rising more than the income rising. And these two are my concern factors. On the non-financial side, which is the second KPI given, the non-financial side consists of commitment. And the examining team has given us the breakdown of commitment for HP. It includes education and development as a non-financial KPI, conservation and preservation as a non-financial KPI, satisfaction as a non-financial KPI, and environment as a non-financial KPI. 5 non-financial KPIs. But information is only given about commitment. So they have given us breakdown of HP commitment, performance against commitment. We have not been given any performance of HP against education or conservation or satisfaction that can come on the day of exam. But in the pre-scene, we have only been given information against commitment. Now, commitment means the number of visits to your historical places, and the number of members in the growth in members, and the number of visits. And that information is given to us on the last page of the pre-scene. Now, when I found how much visits have increased or how much members have increased in XO and X1, the visits increased by 4.12%. In X1 and X2, the visits increased by 2.87%. And in X2 and X3, the visits grown by 1.74%. They're growing, but at a declining rate. Members grow by 4.42%, then they grow by 2.82%, and they just grow under 1% in the last year. That means some problems are starting. Your number of visits, the growth in number of visits is increasing at a declining rate. Your increase in member is increasing at a declining rate. I hope you agree with me. That's why I've shown the arrow going down. Is it a concern factor for HV that why the visits are going down? People are not liking your services at historical places. are not very happy with your volunteers at the historical places. People are not happy with your shops, what you're doing to engage your visitors. The visitors are not happy visiting your site for some reasons, some issues, some health and safety issues, some misbehaviors of the volunteers. Members are going down. Could be recession in place in EADCA. But apart from recession, can there be any concerns for members? The members are not happy with something happening in HP, some issues happening in HP, which is given to us on the day of exam. So will you remember for the day of exam that your uh, your income, sorry, your expenses growth are more than income growth? And will you remember for the day of exam that your member and visits are increasing at a declining rate? Please take a printout of this slide and go through it and just remember the numbers so you can spontaneously quote these numbers on a day of exam. Now, my concerns. Number one, look at this. On a day of exam, you might get a question: assess the financial and non-financial performance of HP. We know such questions have come even in the past paper. If you've seen the questions around previous two charitable questions around BCO and NCCP, I think in one of the case, either BCO or NCCP, we had a question, assess the financial and non-financial performance. Because a lot of information has been given to us and more can come on the day of exam. Criticism around rising expenses. Criticism around rising expenses, particularly the admin. And why are expenses rising? The members can ask you, the media can ask you, the CSB can ask you, either because your sites are old or your admin cost is rising up, anything. What HP can do to boost income? How can you boost income? Are your shops underperforming? Are your cafes underperforming? Are your cafes and shop not in line with competitors? What is happening wrong? Where is the income going down? Is the income going down in which area? How to boost up income? What you can do? What steps you can take as HP to boost up your income? Is that clear to all of you? What steps you can take to boost income? You might be asked for an advice. You might be a consultant. You might be a consultant on the day of exam. And as a consultant, you might be asked for advice to boost income. Members, visits declining. Any criticism boiling up? The visits are increasing at a declining rate. The members are increasing at a declining rate. Is any issue boiling up? Wait for the exhibit on the day of exam. If any issue is boiling up, we get to know that on the day of exam. And if any issue is boiling up, you need to investigate that as a task on the day of exam. Is everyone clear with this KPI analysis, financial, income, expenditure, surplus? We have some problems on the side of income, and expenses are growing more than income, and surplus is squeezing. We have some issues on the side of non-financial, particularly commitment. And in terms of commitment, the visits are increasing at a declining rate. Members are increasing at a declining rate. And I hope you're all fine with the questions I am raising. The 4 questions at the bottom of your screen. Please, these are all important questions which can pop up on the day of exam. Is everyone clear with this particular slide? Should I move on to the next one? And if you have any questions, you can just hold on. Right? Thank you. Just let's move on to the next one. KPIs versus HP. Non-financial KPI. We have a non-financial KPI, which is known as satisfaction. But have we been given a breakdown of satisfaction like commitment? No. But what I tried to investigate from satisfaction, because satisfaction as a KPI, if you look at the breakup of satisfaction given to us in the pre-scene, satisfaction relates with 3 things. Number 1, feedback from members and visitors. Number 2, feedback from employees and volunteers. And percentage of annual members renewing. These are 3 breakups of satisfaction. Feedback from members and visitors. Can we get something on the day of exam? Considering the members' growth is declining, considering the visitor growth is declining. Look at this. I've just copy pasted this from the previous slide for your relevance, commitment. This is basically the breakup of commitment, but this is also going in line with satisfaction. If the member growth is declining and if the visitors growth is declining, look at this number one. Can we get a feedback in an exhibit? One exhibit is giving us the feedback about members and visitors, right? Feedback from employees and volunteers. You might get some negative feedback from employees and volunteers. And percentage of annual members renewing. What if there is a fall in that on the day of exam? We know there are 4,000 employees at HP, and we know there are 20,000 volunteers at HP, and we know one of the challenge with the volunteer is they're unpaid, and they might be very casual. They might leave without informing you. We have already read that challenge, right? Keep that challenge in mind of a volunteer. We have paid employees, 4,000. There could be some negative feedback from volunteers. There could be some negative feedback from the employees on the day of exam. There could be some negative feedback from the members and visitors. Look at the picture in front of your screen. The commitment illustrate something could pop up on the day of exam. Now look at my likely questions here. Number one, members visit declining growth. Any criticism boiling up, considering feedback from members and visitors can be given in an exhibit on the day of exam. So you might get an exhibit around feedback, and you are a consultant and you need to, or you are an HR director and you need to evaluate that. Exhibit can present information about a recent staff survey. We know SBL examining team is very fond of putting a recent staff survey. You must have seen that in lots of prior papers, a recent staff survey. You are an HR director and you are an HR director at HP. And you are being asked on Tuesday of your day of exam to investigate the results of the recent staff survey because some of the volunteers are not happy, or feedback received from employees or feedback received from volunteers relating to dissatisfaction. They're not satisfied with HP. They're not satisfied working in HP. Or work-life balance. Look at this. They're not satisfied with the work-life balance as a volunteer or as an employee. Work-life balance. Have you heard this term somewhere in the recent article, the new article, which I put on the YouTube? You know there is a new article for SBL March exams. Work-life balance, new technologies and impact on culture. So can employees be unhappy with the work-life balance? They believe there is a lot of load on them. HP takes a lot of work from them. That's spoiling their life. They're spoiling their private life, their personal life. Negative actions from HP on voice raised by employees are potential thought process. And I've taken this from the National Trust. You know National Trust? What I believe the SBL examining team has idealized historical places from National Trust in UK. National Trust in UK is the largest heritage charity in UK, and I think the inspiration for historical places has come from it. Lots of information about National Trust and historical places are very relatable. When I search for National Trust on the Google, I was just amazed about the similarities we had in National Trust and historical places. National Trust is 125 years old and historical places is 120 years old. And almost the number of members, like 5 million members, National Trust also have something like 5 million members. What is happening in National Trust? National Trust employees have issues about work-life balances. The National Trust has already issued flexible workings. National Trust has already implemented a policy of flexible working from home in the recent last 3 to 4 years. And that is where the new article is. You know, the new article has talked a lot about work-life balances. The new article has talked about a lot of remote workings, home workings. So employees at HP can be concerned about work-life balances, and the new article comes in. Employees at HP could be concerned about negative actions HP is taking when they raise their voice. And this is happening in National Trust. There was a criticism about National Trust that when the employee raised their voice or the volunteer raised their voice about anything happening, uh, National Trust used to put their voice off. They used to take negative actions against those people. And that was criticized, like something against the freedom of speech. So I've taken all these idealizations from, in reality, the National Trust. And this is quite relatable with the non-financial KPI we're looking for on screen, which is satisfaction. Are you all clear with the bullet number 2? Any recent staff survey which you need to evaluate on the day of exam, raising concerns from employees and volunteers, any dissatisfactions, any work-life balance issues, any negative actions which HP has taken against the employees, and employees are not happy that why are they clamping my voice? Why they're putting barriers on my voice, on my freedom of speech? So such issues can pop up. So the article Impact of New Technologies on Organizational Culture, which I've already covered, and it's already there on my YouTube channel. I hope you have read this article, you have watched my video on the work-life balance, and that can become potential for the March 25 exams in terms of this particular KPI, which is satisfaction. Are you all clear the reason of doing satisfaction separately? Are you all clear why I have emphasized on satisfaction as a separate KPI? Because something around satisfaction, something around employees and volunteers can build up in your real exam. Right? Yeah, Karan, thank you so much. English heritage is also very similar to HP, but National Trust is more in line because lots of facts about National Trust is just reconciling with this HP. I'm not saying you go down and research National Trust, not at all. I've done that for you. I'm just giving you an example that National Trust relates with historical places, but that doesn't mean that you end the Zoom meeting today and you go and explore National Trust. That's a waste of time because whatever is needed from the National Trust, I put it down here. Is everyone clear? Is everyone clear with this particular slide in front of your screen? Satisfaction, types of questions which can pop up from satisfaction, types of thinking points which can pop up from satisfaction. So please ensure you address the KPIs, you address the financial KPIs and the non-financial KPIs very well for the day of exam, and lots of potential questions which can pop up from commitment, from satisfaction, and your surplus squeezing down. Right? Okay. Now coming to the big thing, and I'll be spending a quick 30 minutes here. That's on the main charitable organization we have for the exam on Tuesday. That's historical places. Now we know about the charitable sector, all of you. We know about the heritage subsector. We know about the challenges. We know about the KPIs. We know about the issues. We know about the competitors. We know so much now, right? Now comes to the final version, historical places. Let's open it up. Some key facts about historical places. It was founded 120 years ago. Look around 350 sites, which are over 300 years old. Look at the number of sites, 350 sites. Will that increase a lot of your site maintenance cost? So just think about the site maintenance cost here, right? So your site maintenance cost can go up. Site maintenance can go up, right? The site maintenance cost can go up. Think about that. Two largest charities, we've already discussed the two largest charities, the LTP and HP. The values for HP includes inclusivity, diversity, social and environmental responsibility, and stewardship. And I have some concerns around values. I have some issues around values. I believe something around a value can pop in because if I look at the National Trust, if I take inspiration from National Trust, there are lots of things which can pop up from these particular values. One of the value or two of the value which I believe are the most important is inclusivity and diversity. Inclusivity and diversity to me are important, and I'll just come back to it that why they are important. They acquire buildings and other sites as gifts from the previous owner. So either they get gifts from the previous owner or by purchasing from the surplus funds. Purchasing from surplus funds. Is surplus funds going down? Yes. Are they squeezing? Yes. Is there a pressure on income? Yes. So purchasing from surplus funds could become a problem for HP. Yes, if they get a gift, that's fine. So acquiring buildings can become an issue. Okay, governance. We know a lot of information about governance has been given to us. If I just summarize that quickly, I'll not be going into depth. You know there is a two-tier board structure in place, and charities do operate with a two-tier board structure. We've already seen the two-tier board structure in the case of BCO, I guess, the BCO, a charity in the past paper. So two-tier board structure. At one tier, they have the board of trustees, and at the other tier, they have the executive board. And you know the composition of the board of trustees, and you know the composition of the executive board. If you want to see the elaboration about what is the composition of board of trustee or what is the composition of an executive board, that is given on the next slide for your safety. But at least you all know there is a two-tier board in place. Audit committee, nomination committee, and remuneration committee are in place. They don't have a risk committee. Could pop up on the day of exam. I'll just tell you how. Code of conduct. They have a code of conduct as part of corporate governance, and the code of conduct includes principles relating to commitment. We've already seen the KPI on commitment, so that can develop on the day of exam. We have seen the breakdown of commitment as a KPI, a non-financial KPI, conflict of interest, and bribery. What if there is some media criticism that some of the board of trustees or some of the executive boards are under some bribery issues? Can pop up on the day of exam because they have a bribery related code of conduct. So anything around anti-bribery or anti-corruption practices or anything about any bribery scandal popping up around the board of trustees or around the executive management is quite likely. But commitment is important because there is a KPI on commitment, and we already spoke a lot on that. Now, some of the important things from key facts and some of the important things from governance. Number one, you might get an exhibit on the day of exam asking you about diversity and inclusion concerns. Critics concerns about gaps in representation across different demographics. There might be a criticism on HP that when we look at their executive management, when we look at their board of trustees, when we look at their volunteers or when we look at their employees, there is a representation gap. They have been taken from like one demographic area. They have not been taken from many demographic areas in ERDCA. There could be gender diversity issues. There could be demographic diversity issues. There could be religious diversity issues, ethnic diversity issues, age diversity issues. So a lot of diversity issues can pop in on the day of exam, and there might be a concern that your board of trustees, your executive management, your employees, your volunteers are less diversified. Inclusivity. They're not demonstrating inclusivity. They've not been taken from all demographic areas of ERDCA. I hope you understand demographics, right? They've not been taken from all demographic areas of ERDCA. So some concerning factors around inclusivity and demographic can pop up on the day of exam. Please do read the article Diversifying the Board. You know, there is an article, you should know the benefits of diversity. You know, this has been a favorite area of SBL examining team, and they're very fond of asking questions around diversity. Number two, concerns about stewardship. You know who is a steward? Steward is an agent, right? Concerns about stewardships. The members are not happy with board of trustees. The members are not happy about executive management. Are agents fulfilling their duties towards the charity? Because you know the charitable organizations' basic purpose is welfare. If they're getting exuberant salaries, they're getting good salaries, your administration cost is rising, are you really fulfilling your responsibility as a steward? So there could be some issues around stewardships, some issues around agency, agent principal relationship. Agent principal relationship has come in the past papers when we look at the charitable organization BCO. Benefits of having a separate risk committee. They don't have a risk committee, but do you believe there are a number of risks given to us? Number of risk. Do they have a risk register? Do they have a risk register? Yes. Do they have number of risk? Yes. Are there number of challenges? Yes. So is it better to have a risk committee? What if the audit committee is currently taking on the role of a risk committee? We have seen questions in the past paper asking for separation of an audit committee from risk committee. What are benefits of a separation of an audit committee from risk committee? Because it is a charity, right? And charity can have problems that they have given audit committee the role of risk committee. Separate audit committee from risk committee. What are benefits of having a separate risk committee? Be prepared. Information about uh, any particular issue at a major site. Look at this. Information about any particular issue at a major site. How many major sites they have? Do you remember from the pre-scene? How many major sites have they given to us in the pre-scene? They have particularly named the major sites, all of you. 5. Very good answer, Karan. They have 5 major sites. Why have they given us 5 major sites, Karan? They can draw attention that one of the site is facing an issue. One of the site is having a problem because these are your major sites. So any problem at a major site, can that affect your income? Can that affect your popularity? Can that affect your negativity as HP? Yes. So there are 5 popular sites, 5 important sites. Any issue with any of the popular site on the day of exam could be damaging to your reputation as HP. And lastly, we have a SAF model, suitability, acceptability, and feasibility model around acquisition of other sites. What if a question comes to your exam that they want to acquire they are confused about whether to acquire site A or site B because they have limited surplus funds. Because of the limited surplus funds, they have to choose between A or B. Now you need to evaluate the suitability, acceptability, and feasibility of the site A and the site B and choose the one. Are you getting my point, all of you? So you have limited funds, and you have to buy one of the historical site, either A or B. Which is better? So apply the SAF model and choose is A better or B better because you have limited surplus funds to invest. So SAF model around an acquisition of a site can pop in. Are you all clear with that? So historical places, we have key facts. Historical places, we have governance. Please remember the governance structure. Please remember the key facts. Please remember the types of questions which I have just informed you. Okay, this is the governance. If you want to go over that, I'm not going over it. Once you get this presentation, you can take a printout. You know the governance. They have a 2-tier board. I've given you the breakup of the 2-tier board, board of trustees and executive board. Who appoints who? Uh, is there any role of members in appointment? Is there any role of nomination committee in appointment? Just please go over that. I've just given you a summary over here about their appointments, the role of the remuneration committee, the role of the nomination committee in the appointment process, the role of the members in the appointment process, right? So just go over that. Okay, historical places. Stakeholders, lots of stakeholders are given to us in this pre-scene about the sector, about HP. So we can get something about stakeholder analysis, about internal or external stakeholders, a question around stakeholders. We have seen past paper questions around internal and external stakeholders. So you might be asked about that. You might be asked to do the power interest metrics of the stakeholders, Menlo metrics, that's quite likely. They have 5 million members. They have 20,000 volunteers. They have 4,000 paid employees. Remember that. They have suppliers and contractors. They have suppliers for shops. They have suppliers for cafes. They have contractors for maintenance of the historical sites. They even have one-off contractors for a particular project. They have contractors for the regular maintenance, contractors and suppliers for regular maintenance of the sites, for one-off maintenance. They have suppliers for cafes and shops. So lots of suppliers they have in place. They have lots of employees, volunteers, and members. That's the picture of their stakeholders. Again, board of trustees, the guarantors, you have those executive management, you have those committees in place. There are so many of the stakeholders you can just identify. IT, they have a website. That's good. Website allow donations to be made and members to join. But what is this website is outdated. They want to change the website. You might get a new project. You might get a new project, or you might need to undertake a new project to upgrade the website. You might be an IT consultant and you have been hired to uh, give to just upgrade, sorry, the recent website they have in place. So website they have, just remember that, but it could be upgradation of the website, or some cybersecurity issues around website, some hacking issues around website, or etc. Because a lot of confidential information will be there about the members and the members giving donations, about their addresses, names, and numbers, etc. HP has a computerized information systems which covers major operational functions. So they have computerized systems which are covering major operational functions like marketing, IT, HR, finance. These are sort of areas which are given to us in the pre-scene. So they have computerized information systems, but when you have computers, when you have websites, they're all prone to cybersecurity. They're all prone to hacking. They're all prone to computer-related risk. So just keep that at the back of the mind. Risk. There are 8 risks which are documented in the risk register of HP. We'll just come across that. So they have a risk register, that's good, but they don't have a risk committee, at least in the pre-scene. They have 8 risks given under the risk register, and the risk includes recession in Aerodisia, which is already happening. That's why I put that in red. Climatical change, that's an important risk considering your properties are over 300 years old. Reputation, you might get some reputational damage from any negative concerns from employees, volunteers, members. Your rising expenditures, insufficient financial resources. We've already seen your surplus squeezing. Cybersecurity, you have IT in place, so definitely you're prone to cybersecurity. And loss of employees and volunteer. We know loss of employees and volunteer is also a challenge of the industry because volunteers are unpaid, so they can leave you anytime. So these are numbers of risk which has been given us about the HP, and some of these risks could be important on the day of exam, particularly the ones I've highlighted in red. Recession in Aerodisia, that's reality. Insufficient financial resources, we saw surplus squeezing. Cybersecurity, we have an IT on screen currently, and loss of employees and volunteers, particularly volunteers, could be important on the day of exam. Now, what can pop in? You might get an exhibit on the day of exam which asks you risk, likelihood, and impact. We know that's a favorite area of your SBL examiner, and the application of a TARA model. You might be given the risk, which are already there in the pre-scene, and you might be asked to evaluate the risk in terms of the likelihood and impact, or assess the risk for the likelihood and impact, and then giving the proper mitigation, the TARA mitigation. Adoption of new technologies, upgrading of websites. You might be asked something about upgrading the website, adopting new technologies like any mobile application, because currently they don't have any mobile application. So they can introduce any mobile apps for easier for members to join in, easier for member to give donations, or anyone to give donations. They can have a mobile application. Currently, they don't have a mobile application. So that could pop up on the day of exam that you are being asked whether to invest in a mobile application. So you need to think about that on the day of exam, a mobile app, right? And even you might be asked to upgrade the websites because currently the website is not very much in line with competitors. Shift towards cloud computing. They have a lot of information. They are using computerized information systems. So can they have some cloud computings, particularly What I've seen happening with National Trust, they have IaaS infrastructure related cloud computing. You know, there are IaaS in cloud computing, and lots of charitable organizations I've researched over the internet prefer the IaaS, the infrastructure, because that's very much beneficial for charities being smaller rather than those larger listed companies. So they prefer the IaaS more in cloud computing. The articles, application of new technology, part 3, cloud computing, under syllabus area E, cybersecurity under syllabus area E, applying big data, because there's a lot of information about members, volunteers, employees, who is giving donation, who is visiting the historical places, what are trends of visiting in historical places. Can they analyze that data? Can they identify in which areas to focus on to build up income, in on what age composition to focus on what gender to focus on? Because there's a lot of information about who is visiting, who is giving donation, where is the donation coming from. So can they analyze the data and identify the areas to focus on? So application of big data could be important. E-commerce, because they have a website, so potential upgradations, uh, introducing a mobile technology for giving donations, etc. 4 lines of defense and assurance mapping under syllabus area D, risk, because they have risk. So examining team can ask you about anything about the 4 lines of defense or 4 layers of defense they can put in place, how to ensure that the risk is mitigated well. And stakeholders, part 1 and 2. You know, Menlo metrics is in the part 1, and then in the part 2, you have a lot of things about instrumental and normative, including Gray, Owen, Adam. This is a charitable organization, normative philosophy, not instrumental philosophy. So, as part of normative philosophy, Gray over Adam or testing of Gray over Adam, we've never seen Gray over Adam coming in exam paper, but could pop up because it's a charitable organization. So, anything about the stances of Gray over Adam can come in. Yes, the presentation will be shared, don't worry, everywhere. So, you will be getting access to this presentation. Is everyone clear with this particular slide about stakeholders? I'll be doing the Menlo metrics. IT, risk, and then some exhibits which can pop up on the day of exam, including the articles. Is everyone sound with this? Okay, just let's move on. Historical places. We have been given something about the social and environmental parts scattered. I've got a lot of scattered information about social and environmental, and I brought it at one place. Number one, their website contains key actions of HP, including actions around sustain. So actions around sustainability are given on the website extracts in the pre-scene. Values, the values of HP includes social and environmental responsibility. So that's number two. Non-financial indicators includes something about environment. And when you look at the non-financial indicators about environment, that environment is being broken down into resource consumption, comma, percentage of energy obtained from renewable resources. So how much percentage of energy is coming from renewable sources at the historical places which this charitable organization is operating? Waste and recycling rate and emissions. Now, you know, these charitable organizations are running cafes and shops. They have historical places. How much energy is coming from renewable sources to lit up those historical places? Your head office, waste and recycling rates, about the types of things you're using at the shops and cafes, are the recyclable, emissions, resource consumption. So that's the third information we have about social environment. And lastly, risk. The risk includes something about climate and weather, how climate and weather can be damaging to the properties. 4 areas across the pre-scene, I found something about social and environment: website, values, non-financial indicators, and risk. Now, you know how favorite this area is of the SBL examiner? What can come in? The article on integrated reporting is important. Please do read the article on integrated reporting. We know six capitals integrated reporting has been a popular area. If you see a couple of past papers of SBL, one of the favorite area of SBL examining team. So can there be a case that historical places prepare an integrated report, or historical places present a report to the members about the six capitals and how six capitals is creating the value, right? Environmental report can come in on the day of exam because a lot of things have been given. So you might be asked to prepare an environmental report, what actions HP is taking to protect from the climatical changes, or what actions HP is taking for resource consumption or energy from renewable sources. You will be given information in an exhibit if an environmental report pops in. Integrated reporting, reporting around six capitals, and need for ISO 14001 certification. If you are my regular student, you know I've done a topic on ISO 14000. So a certification around ISO 14000 as an accreditation that you are environmental friendly, as an accreditation you are doing good for environment, as an accreditation that your resource consumption, your energy obtained from your renewable sources, waste and recyclings are all good. National Trust in UK have an ISO 14001 certificate. So inspiration, right? So ISO 14001, environmental reporting, integrated reporting, all seems important with the influx of information we have around social and environment on HP in the pre-scene. So please be ready for that. Okay, finally, to the last two things quickly. We got to know the stakeholders. You know, there are so many stakeholders given to us in the pre-scene. Even when you look at the heritage subsector and when you look at historical places, so lots of information about stakeholders. I try to sum up, and this is my own perspective. Don't just argue why you've given it high power or low power, or high interest or low interest. That's my perspective. You can differ from that and you can make your own Menlo metrics, but better you make your own Menlo metrics just to be sure of its application on a day of exam. Now, this is what I got. I'll just be brushing over it quickly. I'll not be putting time. You can get this slide and take a printout. I have classified the trustees, the executive management, and the charity supervisor board under high influence and high interest. That is high interest and high power. Manage closely, and you can see the description. I have classified the members, guarantors, media, supporter, and contractors from major projects under high influence and low interest. That is high power and low interest. And I've put them under keep satisfied. Again, you can differ because there could be different perspectives. I have taken a different perspective. You can take a different perspective, but I've given my description. If I'm saying high power and low interest, I've given a description. If I'm saying high power and high interest, I've given a description from the pre-scene, nothing out of the pre-scene, right? So you can just brush over who are the key players, who are the keep satisfied. Next, donors, volunteers, other paid employees. I have put them under keep informed and I've given the reason. And even the regular site maintenance contract, the contractors who are doing the regular site maintenance, I put them under keep informed. And I have included the non-members visitors, the visitors who visit the historical places, non-members, I put them under like minimal effort, low influence, low interest. So this is my classification. Please just brush over that because a lot of information is there about us to make a Menlo metrics, and you can be asked to do so on the day of exam, or you might even be asked to identify the internal and external stakeholders. A couple of times that question has popped in SBL. So you need to know the bifurcation of who is internal and who is external. Okay, risk register. We just got to know that there are 8 risks under the risk register, and they do have a risk register. Just let's see the risk register and the analysis of that quickly. You might be asked on the day of exam to assess the likelihood and impact based upon information in an exhibit, and you might be asked to apply the TARA model. This is the risk and this is the description. Please just go over that. They have a threat to reputation. Just read the description. They have other threats to income, There is a recession already. Loss of employees and volunteers, we've already talked about that. Insufficient financial resources, we've talked about that. I've even given you a financial analysis on that. Poor performance by suppliers and contractors, if any, can pop up on the day of exam. Nothing has been given in the pre-scene about the poor performance. Health and safety can pop up on the day of exam. Some health hazards could be the reason why your visitors are going down, right? Manish, please stop writing on the screen. Climate and weather, some information can come on the day of exam that how the climatical changes, the floodings, the rainfalls, the humidity is affecting the historical sites. Cybersecurity could be important because they are using a website, they have information systems. So benefits of cybersecurity or something like that could be important. So you might be asked to assess the likelihood and impact of these risks, and you might be asked to implement the TARA model. Okay, finally, we are coming to the most important thing, perhaps for which you are coming into this pre-scene debrief today. Important articles, models, and questions. Now, just 1 minute before we do that. We have gone over the pre-scene. I hope you liked it. We went over the charitable sector. We got the legal position. We got the regulators. We went into Prakar, please put off your camera. We went into the heritage subsector. We found the challenges, we found the income, we found the expenses, we found the KPIs. We relate the KPIs of the sector with HP. We got into HP. We looked at the facts about HP, the risk about HP, the problems with HP, the stakeholders at HP, the governance at HP, and the IT at HP. And throughout my pre-scene debrief, I was giving you the thought process. What can come in, what can come in, what can come in, what can come in, what can come in. I hope you had the notes of that. And that's also given on my presentation. So you can take a printout and go ahead. Now, just a summary quickly. Important past papers. September, December 20 around BCO because that was a charity, and March, June 21 NCCP because that was a charity. Please do both these papers. At least look into the requirements. At least read the requirements and requirements around agency, two-tier, internal, external stakeholders. Even there is a requirement, I think, in one of the paper around diversity, if I'm not wrong. Diversity has come in one of those papers. So lots of relatable topics which we have discussed today. I think even in one of the paper, there was a cybersecurity because one of these charities had IT. So we had a cybersecurity question. So please ensure every question in BCO and every question in NCCP at least is read and understood, because you might get a similar looking question on Tuesday. Is that clear to all of you? So will you be brushing over these two past papers if you have not done so yet? Okay, that's good. Thank you, Prakhar. Moving next, important articles. Now, I've given you a glimpse of articles throughout my last 60, 70 minutes, but just let's put them one place. Articles, impact of new technologies on organizational culture. I discussed that work-life balance. Some of the employees might be concerned about the work-life balance, and HP might be considering of introducing a flexible working environment, working from home, just to satisfy the employees. So something around work-life balance can come in. So better go with the article which I have covered on my YouTube. That's a new article, right? Application of new technology, cloud computing is important. Part 3. Please do the part 3 around cloud computing. Particularly, be very familiar with IaaS as a service model, because IaaS as a service model is very much applicable to the charitable organizations, and the National Trust is using it. Cybersecurity, we know there is IT in place. So cybersecurity benefits and challenges can pop in. That's the favorite area of your examiner. That's an article. Applying big data, a lot of data, they can analyze the data, benefits of big data. They can analyze the data about members, non-members, visitors, volunteers, employees, and they can get to know lots of important information from that analysis, which can help them find a better direction for future. E-commerce, further improvement to the website or additional technologies like mobile technology, mobile apps. So do read the article on e-commerce. Integrated reporting framework, please do read that article for 6 capitals and application to HP. All About Stakeholders Part 1 for Menlo metrics, and All About Stakeholder Part 2 for the normative philosophy, because it's a charitable organization which do adopt a normative philosophy. Gray Owen Adam as a model cannot be ruled out. So be alert to that. Performance indicators, assessing the financial and non-financial performance. A lot of that was given. So please do read the article, Performance Indicators. 4 lines of defense and assurance mapping. We do discuss that when I was discussing risk with you. Strategic planning process, part 1, only part 1, right? About PESTEL, you might be asked to evaluate how the macro environment is influencing HP. I think there was a question about macro environment influencing one of the charity, either it was BCO or NCCP. So how the macro environment affects HP, because a lot of information is given to us about economics, economic recession, something about social donors, volunteers. We had technology in place. We had a lot of legal CSB regulations. So I think PESTEL can easily develop, and further information can be given to you on the day of exam. 4 to 5 forces can be asked for. Industry analysis. We have been given about competitors. We have buyers and suppliers. So probably you might be asked about 4 to 5 forces, can't be ruled out. Diversifying the board, I discussed you with that. Inclusivity and diversity was one of their value. So this is a list of 11 important articles which you need to brush over, including the number 1 is the most important. Okay, then top topics, models, and theories. Number 1, two-tier board, advantages, disadvantages. Internal and external stakeholders, stakeholder mapping, Menlo is number 3. Agency relationship, number 4th. Present and future culture. What about, there is some discussion in an exhibit about a shift in culture, a change in culture, probably a change in culture coming from home working, work-life balance, change in culture coming from the new article where they're introducing work from home or flexible working, and how that would affect the present and new culture. You know, cultural web is important theory for SBL. Integrated reporting, 6 capitals, ISO 14001. Management report on internal control. You should be familiar with that. That what are ingredients of a management control on internal control. You might be asked about what should be included in a management report on internal control. You might be asked to evaluate the weaknesses in internal control. Evaluate the need of a risk committee. Risk assessment, TARA model, likelihood and impact. Climatical risk. You might be asked what actions the management could take to address the climatical risk. What strategies can management adopt for climatical risk? Assessing the financial and non-financial performance, the SAF model, acquisition of sites. You have less funds, which site to acquire and apply the SAF model. Benefits of cybersecurity, cloud computing, either IaaS or PaaS. Benefits of data analytics, and the new article, home working at charity, flexible work environment. 15 things which we got scattered across. Lots of other thought process came into my discussion today. I hope you will benefit from that. And finally, learning from the National Trust. Just 5 minutes and important. Learning from National Trust. When I was going through National Trust, I found some things which are linkable to HP. And I think something can pop up in that direction. Just let's go through this. This is additional research. You should not do this. I have done it because I'm a tutor. I know the boundaries. I know the limitations. If I ask you to do it, you might just waste your next 7 days. So I made a summary for you. Number 1, issues around staff, paid workers and volunteers. Staff raising concern about HP are suspended freedom of speech. This is happening in National Trust, that the staff who are raising concerns about National Trust, they have been suspended. Freedom of speech. So anything around dissatisfaction of staff, dissatisfaction of volunteers, they're not very happy. We've already addressed that, right, today, can pop in. Number 2, pressure groups like media, like regulator, raising concerns, on staff facing issues or negative consequences for speaking out. Media can raise concerns that why are you not giving a freedom of speech to employees? Why are you not giving freedom of speech to volunteers? So media or regulator can pop in, and media and regulator can work as a pressure group on the day of exam, because this happened with National Trust. Work-life balance challenges, particularly during peak tourist season. When there's a peak tourist season, a lot of people visited the national places, the historical places. So in that way, the volunteers and the employees can feel much work loaded. So work-life balances can come in, flexible workings can come in, and that's where this article could be important. Diversity and inclusion concerns. Critics' concerns about gaps in representations across different demographics. We already discussed that today. So there could be concerns about lack of diversity, lack of demographic representations from EADCA, or your employees and volunteers just representing one part of EADCA, not all part of EADCA. HP sites are not necessarily accessible to disabled. This is the problem with National Trust, that your sites are not inclusivity. They're not accessible by disabled. So that is also inclusivity. Uh, are your sites accessible to disabled people? Do you have ramps, wheelchairs, special provisions for the disabled? If you don't have such things, then your sites are not inclusive to one section of ADCA. So disabled is also inclusive. So do you have provisions for disabled? That's the problem with National Trust. Rise in expenditure, we know that's happening in HP, that is happening in National Trust. Flattening of income curve, evaluation of financial performance, we've already done that. Number 6. Number 7, site maintenance cost rising, extreme weather, climatical changes, over 300-year-old sites, lot of pressure on your site maintenance cost, lot of pressure on your expenditures with over 300 years old slide, floods and damages. I was reading about National Trust. Lots of their sites are damaged by floods and rising temperatures in UK, rising humidities in UK, and you need to know that. Number 8, promotion of negative history of sites, not liked by groups or sections. National Trust has sites which are older by 300 years, interestingly. And I was reading through that some of the historical sites has some links to slavery as an historical perspective. Because whichever historical site you're promoting, you also need to tell the visitors about its history. And National Trust was telling people about a history of slavery which existed in UK 300 years ago. And some sections of the people didn't like that part of the history. They thought it should be omitted. That's a negative history about UK or any other country. So there was a criticism on National Trust portraying history which was wrong, or telling part of the history which should not be taught to the visitors. So there could be something about HP, that HP is telling something about history which the regulator or the media does not want you to portray, or they're telling something about the negative history of ADCA which they should not tell. There should be a pressure only to tell the positive history. So that is reality happening with National Trust. They were telling some history about slavery which people didn't like about. And number 9, visitors and conservation, rise in number of visitors and the impact of that on the conservation of the national sites. So these are 9 issues which I found around National Trust. You can imagine some of them are relatable with what we discussed today. Are you all clear with this? Yes, the 5 best sites, one of the best site could be a problem on the day of exam, right? That's why they're given the 5 as the best. So examining team can create a problem around the 5. Brian, I hope you're clear on that. Is everyone clear with the additional research on National Trust? Can you find some of the points from 1 to 9 relatable? Ahmed Hafiz, I've given you the types of questions, right? BCO, NCCP. I've given you lots of thinking points, what can come in exhibit. If you've watched my 75, 80 minutes, I was telling you this can come, 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 right? I hope you're fine on that. Okay. So you will get this presentation Just wait for 1 minute, all of you, before I give a chance to do a Q&A session. Just listen to me for 1 minute. I hope you will take a printout of this presentation. You will read through it. You have your own summaries. You have your own summaries with you. Take your own summary, see my summary. Whichever you see is better, go with it. Right? Whichever you see better, go with it. And if you think something is additional in my summary and you want to utilize this for the next 7 days, just go about it. But I hope all of you have information about the charitable sector, the heritage subsector, and about historical places on your fingertips by now. Because it's been 7 days since the pre-scene has come in. You must have read it a couple of times. You are doing it today. So I hope 75-80% of information is here. Is that right? Do you know about facts and figures, things going up and down, the problems, issues, risks, challenges, governance, technology, everything? uh, Board of trustees, two-tier boards, committees. Fine. I think is that fine to all of you? So just one last question, and then I take your Q&As. Right? Was how was the pre-scene debrief? Did it help you in the last like 1 hour and 40 minutes? I hope you can watch the recording. You can take notes because a lot of information has to go in, but I hope it helped you all. Right? Okay. Now just hold and listen to me. Okay, do you have any Q&As? Go ahead, one by one. Don't just make a flood of questions because it's difficult for me to read in. Go one by one and keep your questions shorter. See, there is just an influx of questions. I cannot even catch on the speed of the questions coming in. Uh, Abdul Kadir, I think if you just practice BCO and NCCP this week, it's fine. Please ensure you do the recent paper September, December 24 and the mock exam. But the two important papers you should do is NCCP and BCO. Deepika, any last minute tips? I've already given you the tips. Just focus on the pre-scene analysis. Just focus on the thought process which I've generated from the pre-scene. Just focus on NCCP and BCO. Else, I will be putting on my social media tomorrow the last minute advices for SBL students 1 week before exams. Just wait for that. Strategy for 7 days, right? I'll be releasing that out tomorrow. Just stay tuned for it. Uh, okay. So I hope you have absorbed things well. There is one frequently asked question: 5 major sites. Be very careful. Why has the examining team told you that there are 5 major sites, and they've even given us the names of that? They've even given us the names of that. Why? Probably they could draw attention to one of the site in an exhibit which is facing problem. There could be that one of the site has got damaged because of any flooding, weather, or one of the side is facing media criticism, or one of the side income is going down, or the people are not liking that side, there is any misbehavior of volunteers. So one of the side could be developed as a problem on the day of exam. That is why the examining team is telling us there are 5 sites. So of that 5, one can come into the exam, and you know that all these sites, the 5 are important. So any problem within any of them can be a big problem for HP. I hope you're on that, right? Or any major problem at one of the site. So be prepared for that for the day of exam, right? I hope you're all fine and set with it. I'll be sharing this presentation with you so you can download and take a printout of it. And I'll be sharing the recording as well. Just one last minute before I exit out from this session. Any student who's not registered with me, uh, You can see this YouTube channel of mine on screen. There is a video, the very first one, when to use models in SBL answer. Please brush over that. Then there is a video on SBL mock debrief, task 3, task 2, and task 1. Please ensure you watch that as well so you know how to write an answer. Um, and then there is a video on the new article as well, which is right here. SBL new article March 25. So please ensure you also watch that. So 3 videos on the mock, 1 video on the new article, and 1 video on models isn't the best answer in SBL. 5 videos if you can watch through that. Is that clear to all of you? If you have any further questions, you can just drop that on the WhatsApp group. That will be more easier for me to respond back to you. Whichever WhatsApp group you are in, from where you got the information about the session taking place, you can even drop me a question on LinkedIn, Facebook, Insta, wherever you want to, and I will be responding to all your questions. Is everyone clear? Is everyone good enough with this pre-scene to go ahead? Right? So you have done your own analysis. I've done my analysis. Now just mix them up. And for the next 7 days, go ahead, refine yourself for the day of exam. I wish you all the very best of luck. And I hope you excel on Tuesday. And don't forcefully apply the pre-scene in your answer. Read the information given to you in the exhibit. Look at the task, read it well, and do your best. All the best to all of you. Thank you so much for coming in, joining this live session, and wait for the recording coming on YouTube. Thank you. All the best, all of you.